and we'll kick it off. So, welcome to our first Ask Tom office hour session for 2024. My name is Tim Chen, Director of Product Management in the Oracle Backup Recovery Technologies team. We also have Alex Goldblatt today, Principal Product Manager, also on the Backup Recovery team. And together we're going to go through a year in review of key highlights from our technology portfolio and also give a little glimpse of what's ahead for this year as well. So you can use the Q&A function to ask questions, and we'll be monitoring that. And so with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go through three or four principal areas: recovery appliance, autonomous recovery service, database backup service, and then Oracle Secure Backup from our portfolio today. Let's start with recovery appliance. So as many of you know, the Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance is our data protection system designed by our team in conjunction with the engineered systems team for the utmost database protection. And most recently, a lot of the themes and messages that we are talking to customers about and seeing in the marketplace is ransomware protection. That's a very big theme across all of our customers, and backups are especially very critical for that requirement. So three principal areas, and just very quickly refresh everyone's minds, that recovery appliance is principally designed for recovery, right? That's the mainstay. We have a lot of backup appliances and a lot of backups that are done day in and day out, but recovery is really the ultimate goal, right? We back up in order to recover. So with that, we provide zero data loss recovery, continuous validation of the backups to make sure they can be recovered, and fast database restores. We do that through very much unique technology we have within our system to construct virtual full backups very quickly. Second big point here is resiliency. So when you talk about ransomware protection, the conversation isn't just about your traditional backups anymore. It's about making sure your infrastructure is resilient, right? Resilient against ransomware attacks. And so we have multiple layers of defenses in our architecture, including a separation of duty user model, where we have the administrator of the system separated from all functions and privileges from the backup operator, and also from other administrators of, say, a disaster recovery system or another system, say, in a cyber vault location. So these are all separated, and within our framework, you cannot cross roles this way. Each role has their own specific duties and permissions on what activities they can do. Second part of resiliency is immutability. This is a huge part of any kind of storage system that is to protect against malicious or ransomware or any kind of bad actor attack. Once backups are made immutable, they cannot be deleted or changed or altered. Okay, it's a very, very stringent requirement. As you'll see in the next slide, we also backed that up with a compliance assessment we did with the financial services regulation among all of our top banks customers. The compute and storage servers within Recovery Appliance are hardened. We inherit that from the Exadata legacy. So Exadata hardware, both these compute and storage, is leveraged by the Recovery Appliance. And so we're in lockstep with all the security features, with all the protection that they provide at the hardware layer. Okay, so there's much to even talk about with Exadata security model. But suffice to say, because it's a proprietary, very much engineered system for Oracle purposes, that you don't get into the sort of build your own commodity kind of space where you don't have as much sort of control over what can be installed and used right on the system. So a lot of that hardening has already been done by the Exadata product team, and we inherit that within the Recovery Appliance itself. The last point here is about Cyber Vault, and Cyber Vault is a very much popular I would say, popular method in order to create another copy, or aside from your production and disaster recovery copy, another third copy, which would be in an offsite location. Offsite meaning disconnected from access from the production and disaster recovery location. So you have this air gap, if you will, which is sort of isolating that third backup copy from all the other networks and all the other users from the other zones, the production and VR zones. So you can do that with Recovery Appliance to deploy this in a cyber vault, and the Recovery Appliance is managed separately with its own privileges, with its own policies, its own retention, for example, and you can also generate reports for auditing compliance to see the status of that appliance. So it's virtually all the features, right, that you get with just any appliance, but it's deployed in a very specific cyber vault configuration. Now, in your environment, the Recovery Appliance, you can kind of see works in this fashion. So it sits in your environment, and it protects any number of databases here, right? These are Exadatas. These could be just generic Linux databases. Solaris, AIX, it's enterprise, okay, protection. And with these databases, I want to highlight that TD is a big part of the security message. So when we talk about ransomware protection, we also talk about making sure the source data is encrypted. And with TD in the database, you can achieve that. And TD, once it's protected by a Recovery Appliance, there's no access to those blocks. There's no opening of the data in those blocks or anything like that from our Recovery Appliance environment, right? Those encrypted backups, so the encrypted data is still under the purview of the DBA only, using their keys and their access to their key management repository. So everything is secured, but with Recovery Appliance, you do achieve encrypted backups this way as well throughout the life cycle. So 2 ways that we protect the data: real-time transaction protection, which is the zero in our zero data loss product name. That means at transactional stage, we're able to capture all the changes going on in the database. So we get literally 0 to sub-second of RPOs. Okay, and we do that through real-time redo that is shipped to the Recovery Appliance continuously. Second part of this mechanism for protection is incremental forevers. And this is what we call, with Armen incremental backups, the same script, the same process you do today, with your backups to your own devices, but you're just using an Armen incremental level 1 command forever. Okay, after the first level 0, then it's just level 1 incrementals. This allows virtual fulls to be created, and the virtual full backups are very unique to us. What I mean is that these virtual fulls are able to be restored on demand as a physical full backup as of any time the incremental was taken. So now you get a full restore with every day's incremental taken, and you save a lot of time for recovery because you don't have to now restore a week or 2 weeks or however old full backup and then restore and apply all those incrementals as you normally would do in a traditional model. So we give you virtual fulls that can be quickly restored every day. And then you have the real-time redo that is then restored and applied to your database for recovery. Okay, so it's both optimized, again, for the backup side, just the changes are taken while offering full recoverability, including last sub-seconds worth of changes. As I mentioned, the backups can be made immutable on the storage of the Recovery Appliance, and we have done a very thorough assessment with against the SEC 1784F regulations, a big one that all of our financial services customers needed to comply with. This happened in the last, I would say, couple of years. But we did this with an auditor called Cohasset Associates, and we produced a report, and those links can be made available at the end of this presentation too. So it's very stringent policies so the backups, again, cannot be deleted, modified, changed, moved, copied, anything like that within the system itself. Okay, it's been essentially locked down for a specific period of time that you specify. Now, as we go into the cyber vault, this is our other copy that I mentioned before, where it's synchronized, okay, with your production data copies, but it's the network's only open at specific times. That's up to the customer. Once the network is open, then the recovery appliance can send its incrementals again and the real-time redo to the cyber vault recovery appliance. And that window can be kept fairly short because it's just the changes. If you remember back, we don't take full backups anymore with the system. So you save a tremendous amount of time and network consumption and processing by not having full backups now in this environment, okay, both on the production backups, but also when you replicate now to a cyber vault, okay, system. So you've kept that window now, we're called the air gap, intact, and you're making sure that the access is very limited during that time. And again, because of incremental forever, we shortened that window dramatically. We also support archiving to immutable cloud storage, and this is through our OCI object storage that's available. This allows you to create also create an offsite copy for, say, compliance or for longer term retention. That's a very much common thing for a lot of industries: 7-year retention, 10-year retention for financial services records, for personal information records, and so forth. By law, right, that have to be kept in an archive. And so Recovery Appliance offloads all that processing from the client data sources. So it's basically handling now all the archival processes. You prescribe the schedule, the kind of backup you want to take, and the Recovery Appliance will execute that and offload that from all the production servers that are being backed up. We also support the same archiving mechanism for on-prem use cases with ZFS. So we have done specific integration with our ZFS storage appliance to be able to act as a second tier archival backup. So we can also do that in the same way here as well for on-prem use cases. Now, again, throughout all this backup processing and as we create the incremental forever, the encryption, as I mentioned, with the source database is kept intact. We don't touch, we don't decrypt, we don't do any changes to those TDE blocks. Those are still TDE blocks in the backup, and they still realize incremental forever efficiencies. This is a big, I would say, a big differentiator against general purpose storage appliances, where encrypted data at the source will result in variations in the compression and deduplication that can be achieved, simply because the encrypted data is scrambled and generic storage mechanisms are not as equipped to be able to apply storage efficiencies to that source data. Okay, so we also perform validation of all the backups that are taken. And also, anytime we read a backup, in order to, say, replicate it to the cyber vault or to read a backup to as part of an archive to cloud storage process, every block is checked for consistency. We make sure that every block that has been backed up matches to when the block in the backup was created. We call that checksum-based validation to make sure that the block hasn't changed or been physically modified during any process or in transit, okay, in that case. Now, one thing to point out as we conclude this slide is looking ahead for this year, we are planning to offer a new facility with Recovery Appliance to create compressed and encrypted incremental forever backups, okay, from TD databases, and applies for non-TD databases as well. What this means is that with TD databases, in the Recovery Appliance backup process, there will be an ability to decrypt the data on the source. Again, remember that only the source data has access to the keys. not recovery appliance. So the ability to decrypt the data purely on this source side, compress the data, and then re-encrypt it in one process. And that backup is then formatted for virtual full and then transmitted to recovery appliance. And so you get all the benefits, as I mentioned today, with recovery appliance, and you can also get all those benefits with TDE databases as well. This is, again, a big departure from storage appliances, which do not recognize and cannot dedupe or compress encrypted data very well or at all. So we believe this will be a very large jump in the efficiency and the compression ratio you can achieve with your encrypted databases now. Okay. Now, just a little bit more about the Cyber Vault configuration, because this is very popular and we get customers asking about this a lot, is that you have the recovery appliance here shown in this picture deployed in your vault. And the vault could be in a separate data center, could be in the same data center, but just in a secured location or zone within that data center. The key part here is that the vault location is separated from the production of zones through a specific secure dedicated network that could be controlled by a firewall or a gateway or some other process by which the network is kept offline most of the time, and it's only again put online or connected for specific synchronization intervals. Okay, so that air gap is created by that network mechanism, making sure the vault is network isolated, that there's no access to those copies from any processor user, okay, from the production side. You have the latest backup available that's always ready for replication to the vault. So the recovery appliance on the production side will queue all the needed backups to be replicated. And as soon as the network control lifts the gate and allows connection to be made, the recovery appliance can then resume its replication process and start sending all those incremental backups downstream, okay, for processing. And the same process on the vault happens where virtual fulls are created, they're validated, and you get the same recovery abilities, okay, from those virtual fulls as you do on the production. And again, the point is that we're only doing incremental changes, not full backups. Not only is this more efficient, but it also minimizes the possibility of intrusion during that window, right, where the air gap is opened. Backups are independently validated, so to make sure that any problems they're done in transit or any kind of something introduced or compromise during that replication process or at the vault is caught immediately. As soon as a validation fails, the user will get a very big bright alert that says such a database A, data file 3, block number 4 detected as inconsistent, and then you'll be able to take action on the source database, for example, and do forensics and analysis thereafter. And again, separation of duty so that users are segregated between all these zones. That's inherently in our framework for user management. One of the customers that have deployed this and done this at scale, the recent U.S. bank and financial services company that we work with, and they were a current recovery appliance user, okay, for production backups. They were looking for a Cyber Vault solution that would work for their scale. That was over 500 databases, over petabytes worth of data that needs to be protected. And so what they did is they actually went through a process to implement this with a third-party storage solution through replication into the vault with that product. And that project actually failed because it could not meet that air gap open window that we talked about, right? When that air gap needs to be opened, there's a specific criteria. In this case, it's 2 hours that need to be met. And so because of the volume of data, the full backups that are part of the traditional backup strategy with third-party solution, they couldn't achieve the 2 hour window. So they went back and came back to Recovery Appliance and said, let's see how this works. And it worked. It actually fit that 2 hour window very well It could be petabytes worth of data, but we again only send the changes, and that kept that window very, very small. Okay, during that process, um, they implemented 4 appliances in the vault. They were able to get flexible retention policies as well as the ability to access the catalog of backups in the vault. So with Armen, you can simply connect to any of the appliances, view its list of databases and the point in time that you desire, and do recovery directly in that way. Okay, that's very easy. It's all database aware and Armen aware, which is how the system was designed. So this was a great success. They went on and deployed additional recovery appliances for uh, for for the disaster recovery location you see here in DC2, and then they also had this vault set up in DC1, but in a separate zone. And so this is just kind of the start of their deployments. Again, they have petabytes worth of data, and they will go from there. Okay, in the same model, and they're able to be very flexible in deciding which of the RAs, for example, in the vault would be the target, and then be able to be restored accordingly into another location whenever needed. Okay, the last part of this section is just about customer success services, which is formerly known as ACS. But there are new services now available for deploying recovery appliance in a cyber resilient environment. And I'm going to step through kind of the process by which CSS gets engaged with a technical account manager. They go through a sort of solution exercise, and then the actual implementation is done through CSS services. You can see the SKU numbers here. We also have a link to more information at the end of this. But they will take care of not just the recovery appliance hardware installation and configuration, but also configuring, say, Oracle Key Vault, for the key management part, especially for TD databases. That's the key repository is essential. That's your survival guide, if you will. If the keys aren't available to the attacker or compromise, then data cannot be read, right? So the keys are kept separately in this repository. They can also set up the recovery appliance for immutability, okay, on the storage itself. So that's another added benefit, okay, of these services. Once they go through the recovery appliance install, they can also enroll and register your protected databases, okay, you see on the left. And then in the vault, they can configure and work with your network team to decide the best way to set up the air gap, and then how to coordinate the recovery appliance replication with that. Okay, we've done this with the customer I just showed before, and we've done that with several others along the way too. But it has been a very good proven process for us as we go through this. And we'll have more information that you can see here. We'll put this in the chat as well, so you'll be able to reference this for more information on the services. Okay, and the last piece is the new hardware box we introduced. We have RA23 that was introduced last year. This provides 274 terabytes of usable backups in the base rack, over 1.5 petabytes in a full rack. This is using industry-leading 22 terabyte disks. So we're pretty much the lead in this for any kind of backup systems in the market. We also provide 100 gig ingest and replication bandwidth. Okay, so again, leading edge there, as well as dedicated network configuration with an Exadata through 100 gig top of rack switches. So we now can support direct connects, thereby bypassing the customer's corporate network for backup infrastructure, which can help the corporate by offloading that traffic, but also speed up the backup from the databases to recovery appliance, right? Because you now have a dedicated network there, and we've been able to benchmark these restores to 35 TB an hour and above. Okay, so what we've seen is whatever client database can be provided over these 100 gig networks, we can push it at that scale. And we scale up, right? Just like Elastic Storage, you can scale up to as many racks as you want, up to 18. You can see it as we grow. We just add storage, just like an expansion system here. And you can see the virtual capacity numbers. It's just to reflect the incremental forever strategy, right? Because physical capacity is one thing, But because we only do changes, the incrementals on a daily basis, that presume that materializes as a new virtual full. And so that full backup has been, a lot of that time has been saved because you just took an incremental. So we represent that with called virtual capacity. So you can see that the virtual capacity is actually a lot more because we can assume here say a 10% change rate. And that means that you get now a 10x increase in the virtual capacity. Again, because we simply get the incremental and we could present a full backup as of that time. So with that, I'll pass it over to Alex, and he'll take over on the recovery service highlights section.
Thank you, Tim. Mm-hmm. So in this section, we're going to cover what is going on in the cloud world. And so we're going to go over some schematics that just sitting behind the hood of the newly introduced autonomous recovery service. So we GA'd in April 2023. There are a lot of accomplishments, so we're going to talk about that, and so then we're going to talk about some enhancements and what's actually going to be in front and center of the development of the recovery service going forward. So just to recollect and actually build on what Tim just pitched about the recovery plans. So as you well know, recovery plans is the core technology that we use all over the place, including in the recovery service in OCI. But there are some caveats though. Even though that's all the technology that Tim just described are definitely applicable, and we have inherited qualities of this amazing architecture in the infrastructure itself. There's also extremely fancy layer of the control plane and management capabilities that we put on the top of the recovery appliances in the cloud. And so we do have a number of services that we integrated today. So as you can see on the left side, it's autonomous dedicated, it's Exadata database service, which is dedicated, built on the Exadata in the cloud. And we have base database services integrated with the recovery service itself. So instead of the Oracle databases, because we have tightly integrated solutions with the front-end database services in the cloud, we have these amazing capabilities to actually follow directly maximum availability architecture guidelines to ensure that when you come to us, we're going to be fully equipped to deliver on the requirements of today related to the ransomware and cybersecurity resiliency. So again, encryption, validation, verification that Tim just described. There is a caveat though. Unlike on-premises, we control all of the above. So the entire stack from the front end database services all the way down to the backend of the recovery appliances in the cloud actually guarantee that you have end-to-end data encryption without touching anything. We actually, on the recovery appliance end, we do not accept unencrypted data in the cloud. So we basically guarantee that all the data that you generate on the front end and all the way down to the backup entities are going to be fully equipped to provide maximum resiliency to any cyber threats. Exadata infrastructure. Again, to remind that we built on the Exadata boxes themselves, meaning that we have the same inherited security constructs and resiliency that you might see on the front-end Exadata in the cloud. But just building on the same capabilities, we just have this unique architecture that we basically provide out of the box just without you touching anything, including deployment in the highly available pairs. So when you go with the recovery service in the cloud, you basically guarantee that you have not just highly availability, but you also have multiple copies in the cloud to ensure that you're going to have complete resiliency in the case of any attacks. And actually, a lot of engagement that we see today with the customers are driven by the security and cyber resiliency requirements. Whether customers just do not have expertise in the house, whether they decide that this type of the venture to build something like that resilient on premises is too expensive, and there are a lot of reasons why they come to us, but the outcome is the same. They just want to make sure that the business critical workloads are going to be fully protected. So hardware availability and the configuration of the hardware in the cloud. The there are multiple layers of the highly available builds that I already described. So it's not just the pairs, it's also the way that we deploy pairs. For example, in the large data centers in the cloud, we ensure that so you have not just the high availability pair builds, but also it's going to be spread across the availability domains, therefore increasing resiliency for any cyber threats that you might see. Access controls and separate admin. This is a little bit unique to the cloud deployment. I mentioned that we have our own management capabilities and control plane. And this is just a part of the inherited qualities of the OCI structure itself. We do not use the same capabilities like we have on-prem because we simply don't need them. We segregate access controls from the front end and all the way down. So it goes so deep that you, as the customer, will not have access to any backup data. Therefore, there is no like physical threat that some rogue actor with admin rights are going to be able to sneak in and to just destroy your backup infrastructure. Policy-based management and backup retention. So this is just a typical kind of large enterprise backup infrastructure in the sense of the management that we brought to the cloud. So we have policy-based management framework. We got to be expanding policy definition themselves. So today is limited to the backup retention only, but going forward, so the same policy are going to be controlling things related to the long-term retention, to the cross-regional replication, and some other features that we're going to be introducing hopefully soon. Fast data recovery with data loss, with zero data loss. So Tim explained that we have unique proprietary engine that actually allows us to introduce transaction level data protection. So we do the same in the cloud. And we have two separate services. So we have one is the base service, and the second one is the zero data loss service that is the add-on to the base service, and you can just simply enable it with just a click of the button in the policy in the automated backup settings on the database side. End-to-end monitoring and reporting. So obviously we don't have enterprise manager, but we have much more advanced monitoring and reporting in OCI. You can set up your alerts. You can have visibility into the storage consumption, into state of the kind of mind for your precious databases, and everything's just hinging on the integrated solution with the overall OCI management. And we just leverage the same to have the same settings, but applicable to what we have in the recovery service. For example, definition of the recovery window and definition of the data loss, potential data loss if something goes south and your backup is not succeeding. Automated detection and alerting is predicated by the same verification capabilities that we have as the part of the recovery appliance technology. So because we have knowledge on the block level of what is happening in the data stream coming from the front-end databases, we can predict in advance and to alert you if we sense that data are not qualified to construct a fully baked backup entity on the backend. So again, it's a combination of the unique integrated solution between the recovery appliance and OCI management framework overall. Immutability is an interesting one. There is a lot of difference between the definition of the immutability for cloud and for the on-prem. In the case of the on-prem, we basically enable immutability on the storage level. In the case of cloud, we don't need to do that. So we have much more robust framework to say that we're immutable by disabling delete workflows, by blocking any access to the backup data, by a lot of things that's basically much more effective in a sense of the controlling of the immutability of your data in any case of any attack whatsoever. So let's get a recap what happened in 2023. And I mentioned that, so we're talking about just short 7-8 months. So we rolled out successfully recovery service in all commercial regions. So we have a lot of customers at this point. We have hundreds of databases already protected worldwide. So we have major customers being deployed in pretty much every region across the globe. And we have a lot of customers with big databases coming to us and asking for the same qualities that can be provided with on-prem to be translated to the clouds, and we do it extremely successfully. We also didn't stop development in 23 after GA show. We actually delivered a lot of additional development perks throughout this 7-8 months. Just to mention a couple, one is substantial improvements for the cross-availability domain restore, meaning that if you have two domain deployments and you wanted to clone your databases to the second availability domain, let's say to your test environment, you can do it today. Another one that I will dive into a little bit more specifics, the backup retention log. This is just the one of the enhancements that's requested by major customers to ensure that immutability spans much deeper than just on the storage level. And what actually lies ahead? The major project in flight is a certification for the government and secure regions. So these are special regions, so they're bound by the specific rules of engagement outside of Oracle domain. It's actually being controlled by the same entities from government and from the security guys. And we have this massive undertaking. We are in the middle of going through the full certification, and we hope that recovery service is going to become available in all OCI regions pretty soon. Second one is really interesting developments, both on the business side and on the technology side. So you're probably aware that Microsoft and Oracle recently announced a partnership, and so the partnership is going to be leading to deployment of the physical gear and physical Exadatas in the Microsoft Azure data centers. And so we building backup infrastructure to obviously provide the same unique integrated solution in the Azure data center. So therefore, recovery service is going to be deployed and used by the Azure customers going forward. Those that are requiring a special treatment for the business critical workloads, including financial institutions and security guys and government entities and whatever you have running in the Microsoft data centers. Data guard standby. This is a part of the enhancements, extremely popular requirements from many customers looking for the enhanced capabilities. So it's specifically driven by the same Oracle maximum availability and architecture schematics. When you have primary and you have disaster recovery sites and you run data guards across, and so if you plan to basically just build a bulletproof solution, then obviously you want to see capabilities that if you have to fail over to the disaster recovery sites, you're going to be able to run the same backup seamlessly to the secondary recovery service deployment in the secondary data center. So that's exactly what it is. This capability is already available with the object storage, and we're going to be extending the same to the recovery service. So therefore, we're going to be absolutely on par with what you might already have deployed. Cross-regional restore. This is driven by multiple requirements. One of them is actually to retain multiple copies in the multiple locations. The second obvious use case is for the complete disaster recovery on the recovery appliance level. So basically just using the same recovery appliance infrastructure and replication across the sites just to ensure that you're going to have yet another level of the resilience, and not just on the primary infrastructure with DataGuard, but also on the secondary level with the backup infrastructure. Cross-regional restore is identical to the cross-ADC restore that I already mentioned. So we actively work on this project. Hopefully, this is going to be delivered pretty soon. This is not just recovery service type of the development. It's also requires the front-end database services to support this initiative. So we have active developments across multiple teams within the Oracle company, as you can imagine. A long-term backup retention. So this one is obviously driven by multiple requirements related to the regulated environments. And today in OCI, unfortunately, we do not have like really robust framework to control the life cycle of the long-term retention management overall. There are some ways that you can use manual backups. You can use Armen keep backups. You can do a lot of stuff to satisfy your requirements, but we want to provide end-to-end automation to this process. And like I said, the lifecycle management is extremely critical because oftentimes people simply lose their archiving data, and so they do not know like what copies were spent out, where are they, and how to basically just even find them. So the same that I already mentioned about the enhancement in the policy engine, that's going to be just add on to the policy itself. Cross-region backup replication, I already mentioned this one. This is just the next level of the resiliency of the overall backup infrastructure on the geographical spread. So default OCI regions. The title might be a little bit misleading and a little bit scary, but it's not. So what actually happened, we introduced additional settings in the configuration of the automatic backups that you see on the screen. And so basically what it means is that we promote automation for the autonomous recovery service as the default engine for backups going forward. There are no changes, so backups, traditional backups to the OCI object storage are still there. But we just saying that because we have parity on the price point, but we have a significant enhancement between the two, we just announce that the autonomous recovery service is definitely a preferable option for any backup in OCI. So again, default region, and again, this is just modified UI. It was rolled out in all commercial regions. The default backup destination, again, is going to be shown up as the first available option in the configuration of the automatic backups, but the drop-down list, if you need to do it, definitely shows OSS destination as available as well. And there is a little more than just meet the eye for the default settings. Today, we require limit control. We do this for the planning purposes primarily, and also for the verification of the financial support for the any additional service rollout, as you know. So the part of the default deployment, so we allow 10 databases and 10 terabytes of the recovery window space automatically granted if you will decide to go with the autonomous recovery service. There is no threat that if you exceed backup capacity limitation, we gonna stop doing backups. Okay, this is not like allowance for the specific amount of the backup storage by any stretch. Like I said, this is just for our own sake and for the better financial controls. But you're going to get notified that you exceeded limits. And so, like I said, backups are not going to be stopping. If you, instead of 10 terabytes, will grow up to 1 petabyte, so be it, you will just going to be flagged and you're going to be built accordingly, but nothing is going to change. On the database count, it's a little bit different. You will not be able to onboard additional databases without limit increase. So you're going to be guided to the limit increase inquiry. You're going to submitting the same SRs just to make sure that all your requirements are going to be satisfied. But like I said, this is just not the kind of stiff hands handling of the customer environment by any stretch. This is just to help you to deliver your services to your consumers and us to control our environment as much as we can. So I mentioned retention lock. So this is additional layer of the security. It was asked by major financial and telco companies that were looking for the layer of the immutability on the management side. So today, if you're going to go to the protection policy for the recovery service, you have the same calendar settings, so you have the same retention that you want to deploy. So as you can see, right now it's 26 days. And what is going to happen if you will click enable retention lock? This setting is going to be preventing reduction of the backup retention. So this is just a classic approach like what you would see implemented for the long-term archive as well. So we do exactly the same, and we're definitely going to be carrying it over for the long-term retention management later on when it's going to become available. But today, we basically just preventing any rogue actor, including database admins, just to go to the policy and change settings to their liking. This one is being controlled by admins, not database admins, but service admins with this special permissions, and the retention lock cannot be lifted just by unclicking the button. So for the backups that's already bound with by the retention lock policy settings is going to be a little bit different trade. So you're going to be able to unlock only with the help of the OCI services and support. Another thing that you cannot move database to another policy. This is a pretty obvious setting. It kind of sounds kind of silly, like even to talk about it, but it is really important. The flexibility of the retention lock is not exactly there. So if you really have regulated environments, and if you really have requirements for the special traits for the immutable, not just on the storage side, but also on the service side, this is exactly what it is. The retention settings in the policy, if you will go back to the automated backup settings for any database service, you can see two separate options. So one is saying that backups should follow the policy settings. Another one saying that the backups are going to be retained for 72 hours in the case of you deleting primary database. We do this intentionally just to make sure that if somebody made a mistake and delete databases like out of nowhere, or it is a rogue actor and decided to delete all the primary databases, you're still going to have 72 hours window to ensure that your database is going to be recoverable. So we enforce the setting of the policy, no matter what, if retention lock is checked in, right? So in this case, there's no basically 72 hours like what I just described. So everything's going to be driven by the policy settings only. Yes, you can increase the backup retention. You cannot decrease it though. Again, for the same rationale. Okay, so in the regulated environments, if auditor came to you and said, okay, your backup should be retained for 60 days instead of 30 days, so you should be able to do exactly that. What you cannot do is to take 30 days and to make 14 out of it. And so 14 days grace period. So this one is important. So the policy is going to be flagged for the modification that you enabled retention lock, but we're not going to be enforcing it right away. We're going to give you a grace period to ensure that you did this policy setting intentionally. And if it was done by mistake, the policy itself is going to be flagged, and you're going to be able to uncheck it before it's going to be completely enforced. And again, restrictions apply to all users. Okay, so if once retention lock is enabled, you cannot do anything with your policy settings or with the backups that belong to the policy settings. Okay, so the only way to lift the restrictions is going to be to open up in the start with the support, and so then it's going to take a special service suggested to unlock your backups and your policy. And just the last thing, because we bump into this conversation all the time, especially driven by people that control front-end databases or just the financial guys that pay for the service itself, okay? And obviously they don't know what does it mean, capacity calculations. And so we have in the OCI website, we have the cost estimator that actually provides also the capacity calculation. As you can see, the way to structure it, just a number of vectors. One is what service you want to use, the base service, autonomous recovery service, or the zero data loss. So there is a drop-down list where you can pick and choose which one. Then you punch in the overall capacity of the front-end databases, and you estimate daily incrementals, and you estimate daily redo logs, and obviously the retention period, and that's going to give you calculations. Why it is important? Because if you need to submit a limit increase request, this is the best way to calculate what should be the proper number that you would like to request from the OCI entities and OCI services. And with that, back to you, Tim.
Thanks, Alex. There was two questions, I think, just quickly, if you can address from the chat. One was about Armen parallelism, how that is set up with recovery service, since it's not user configurable. The second question is about the consumption, like how does recovery service consumption work for the SKUs that you mentioned. So if you can address those two, that'd be great.
Sure. So Armen settings. Armen, we don't control Armen. Armen is a client side of the house. Actually, it's being controlled by the database services. So it really depends on what service and totally depends on what shape. So for example, like number of channels, we don't control it either. It's being automatically allocated by the front end shape that you buy. And the same applies to the performance characteristics that you might anticipate. So everything is driven by the front end. We can basically satisfy pretty much anything in a sense of the speeds and feeds that we can provide from the recovery service. But like I said, Armen activities, Armen settings are completely depending on the specifics of the database service and the specifics of your deployment. The second question, the consumption, as you can see, goes by the virtual gigabytes. We calculate virtual gigabytes just being aligned with the just traditional calculations. So for the Armen backups, we calculated predicated on the same level zeros, level ones, and archive sweeps. And even though that's if using the zero data loss recovery service, we do not run archive sweeps. We defer basically just a transactional tracking to the DataGuard async engine that actually ships archive redo logs to the recovery appliance backend. Still, the amount of data being processed is pretty much identical, because what's happening instead of the archive logs residing on the client side, we create and cut archive logs on the backend. So the capacity consumption is going to be absolutely identical between the two services. And like I said, we did it intentionally just to align with the traditional metrics. There are going to be some deviation if you will like really compare between OSS backups and the recovery service backups. So you will see a little bit discrepancy, and this is primarily driven by the fact that we do not really need additional L0s to restore, or L1s to restore to the last L0. So because we use incremental forever, basically we create a point in time at any given time when you run our backups, meaning that if you have L0 that was taken 6 days ago and you want to restore it to the point in time 6 days later, you have to apply all L1s. In our case, it's not going to be really requiring, so we will not consume this additional L1s for the 6 days, in a sense. But rather than that, if you will go to the OSS consumption calculators and compare it to our numbers, it's going to be pretty much aligned.
Great. Thanks a lot. There's an additional question, but you can just answer that offline on the Q&A. But let's move ahead to the last section just for a few minutes here about database backup service and Oracle Secure Backup. So let me just bring that up. Sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. So let's just conclude here with some updates from these two product areas. So Oracle Secure Backup is our general purpose backup solution that's for file systems, for VMs, and basically everything outside the Oracle database, right? Oracle database we use Armen with, but Oracle Secure Backup complements Armen by backing up everything else within your enterprise. So we find a lot of customers like this because it is very straightforward, simple licensing based on the number of streams you use, not anything else on front end terabytes or any kind of sizes of the data or anything like that. It's strictly based on how many streams or concurrent processes you use to do backup and restore across your clients, and it's so it's fairly low cost. And as I mentioned, we actually use it quite a bit within our local IT for all of our file systems, applications, and VM environments. So I've got a few things here. Is that Oracle Secure Backup was introduced into the marketplace in OCI last year. This allows you to have a very fast deployment of the entire OSB environment ready to go. This is this is much more straightforward than your traditional install of this solution. And we've actually provided an Ansible script to also simplify the client, your backup client's installation. So take a look at the marketplace and download that image, and you can test it out, see how it works. It works for all of the OCI environments. And so, as I said, it's very much part of our holistic data protection portfolio. We also will support very soon immutable backups with Oracle Secure Backup. What I mean is that in the OCI object storage, there are buckets, right, to store your backups, and you could set regulatory compliance enabled in order to then lock those backups in that bucket. That means the bucket cannot be deleted, the files cannot be deleted, changed, or anything like that. Okay, and that's for a specific retention period that you have on there. And so this new property for immutability will be supported. Okay, very soon. We will also support Oracle Secure Backup Cloud Module for S3. This has already been delivered today. It allows your Armen in your databases to back up to Amazon S3. And we are now supporting this for ZFS, okay, through the S3 interface. So we've collaborated with that team to be able to deliver an integrated approach for backing up to ZFS this way, as well as to for recovery appliance to archive to ZFS as well this way. Now, one of the benefits of using this protocol is that it is a third-party backup to Armen and to our to ZDLRA. So if you use the OCI cloud backup module, there's an encryption enforced, okay, on the backup data, and so you need to have either the data encrypted or you have OKV, for example, in the case of ZDLRA. And if you don't have OKV, don't plan to use OKV, then this option to be able to use the S3 backup module interface may work for you, okay, to be able to do that. It doesn't have the same mandatory checks as our OCI backup cloud module. This also will support this S3 interface that we have supports ZDLRA archiving to on-prem S3 devices. We've gotten requests from customers asking if their existing S3 object storage on-premise can be used, and they can now do that as a second-tier storage behind ZDLRA. Now, looking ahead as well, I mentioned the support for OCI immutable backups in the buckets will be there soon. We're also going to support client-to-bucket direct backup and restore. So you actually eliminate the media server component in the OSB environment. This allows you to have much more direct and faster connection, if you will, from the client directly to the destination storage. Right. We also support OCI block storage through volume image backups, along with a single file restore. So this is actually a pretty big advancement because typically block storage don't show up as files, and when you restore block volume, you're restoring the volumes as a whole. But if you just want one file or a few files out of that to be restored, you need a view into that, and that's what we're providing with this new facility coming up. We're also going to deliver the backup modules for the database in a much more streamlined manner. So this is for the OCI object storage with our cloud backup modules, the S3 modules that I mentioned, and the recovery appliance backup modules. These are all designed for their respective destinations. These modules will be delivered with the database itself in the near future. So the 19C and 23C coming up releases will have those appropriate backup modules already part of the database kit, and you no longer download those from OCI. So that'll save you a step there and having to maintain and find the latest one. There'll always be the latest ones available in the release update kits. You will still have charges when you use OSB, for example, for S3 and per stream, as I mentioned, when you use OSB this way, and for database backup service, which is our OCI object storage destination, you'll be charged on the storage capacity used, okay, on an OCI there as well. So those things still apply with this backup module change. And that is our conclusion of our presentation. I pasted a few of the links from the recovery appliance section for additional information on the compliance assessment we did with the ICC regulation, as well as the link to the ACS, or now CSS, Cyber Vault services that we described for cyber resiliency. So with that, we're a little over, but I appreciate your attention. We look forward to seeing you at next month's office hours, and we'll say goodbye and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.